The following is a conversation with Ian Holt, an author of the sequel to the famous Dracula novel. He's also a producer, an actor, and an owner of MovieView.com. It was very scary, but I did it for you guys. So please subscribe, like, share, and I'm too scared to continue. Like just watch it. Just watch it. Hey, Ian. Good to see you. Nice to meet you in person finally.
Yeah.
Very excited about this conversation. So let's start. Let's dig in right away. You're an author of the sequel to the Dracula novel.
Yes, that's true. Yes. Came out in 2009, I believe. I'm losing track of years already. But yes, it's called Dracula the Undead, and I'm the co-author with Dacre Stoker, Bram Stoker's great-grandnephew.
How come did you end up writing the Dracula story?
How much time we have? It was like a lifelong kind of journey. And if I'm going to tell the whole story, I was 10 years old, and I was a big fan of Dracula. And every year for Halloween, I got dressed up as Dracula for all the Halloween parties and trick-or-treating. I was walking with my mom in town in Long Island where I live, and there was a record store, and in the window was all the music from the Hammer horror films with Christopher Lee on it. And I wanted the music because I made little movies back then with my old Super 8, starting. And I got the record, and on the back of the record, I was 10 years old, was the story of the historical Dracula. And it said Dracula was real, Transylvania was a real place, and Dracula was not a vampire. He was like this warrior and all this. And I got fascinated with Dracula. And I've had a lifelong love of horror. My mom, I think one of my first movies I ever watched was The Birds on television, and then I started getting into the Abbott Costello movies. That was Selmy Frankenstein and the Frankensteins. And I wound up, it's really, I got out of college and I didn't know what to do. I just graduated from NYU. I studied with Stella Adler. I took creative writing, and I was like, am I an actor? Am I a writer? And I didn't know how to start. And Bram Stoker's Dracula had just come out, the Coppola movie. And I was flipping channels, and I saw on Bravo Coppola talking about the beginning of the movie, connecting the historical Dracula. And he holds up this book, a nonfiction book called In Search of Dracula by Radu Florescu and Raymond McNally. And it was a bestseller in 1973. And I said, that's it. And I went to the library. I got out the book. The book was amazing. And I quit my job, took all my savings, jumped on a plane, and went to Boston where the two professors were teaching at Boston College. And I checked myself into a motel with a real typewriter. This is how long ago this was. It was a real typewriter. And I started writing pages of the script. And then I became a stalker. I basically stalked the professors for 2 weeks, handing them pages, begging them to read it. And they liked what they read, and they were surprised that someone even remembered their book. They had no idea it was on, Coppola had used it, nothing. And I got the rights for $1, and they told me that they were getting ready to go to the first World Dracula Congress in Transylvania. And this is 95. So this is like right after the wall fell. So Romania was first opening up again. And he was the Radu Florescu was like going to be like a cultural attaché and helping the Bush senior administration, reopen diplomatic relations with Romania. And part of it was the scholarly conference where they were going to discuss the influence of Dracula in our culture and world culture. The vampire Dracula, not the historical Dracula. So next thing I know, I'm on a plane to Romania, and I landed Bucharest, And I'm at this conference with scholars, like, real professors from all around the world, and they tell me I'm gonna do a speech. And I don't even know what to say. So I basically told this story about why I love Dracula and why I was there, researching this novel, actually book, that I was gonna turn into a screenplay about Spartacus-type epic of Dracula. And, while I was there, I toured Dracula's castle in Ponari, his, grave in Snagov Island, the monastery there. I was at his birthplace in Shigashwara, and I was at the palace in Târgoviște. And I amassed all this knowledge about Dracula, and I learned so much. And the professors liked having me around, so they invited me to tour Europe with them and give my speech over and over again. I spent a year on the road with the professors, touring all throughout Europe, giving speeches at colleges and universities with the professors on the historical Dracula. And as I was doing that, I was writing. I was writing the screenplay. And I came back to the States and I started calling agents and said, "Hey, I've got the rights to this best-selling book." And before I knew it, I had an agent. The script was picked up by an agency and was being shown around. And the professors were so happy, they called me in 97 and said, "Would you like to come to the 100th anniversary of the release of Stoker's novel? There's going to be a huge conference in Florida." So I said, "Of course." I got to the conference and it was like a dream come true. It really was. I got to meet the family of Abbott and Costello, the family of Boris Karloff, the Lon Chaney family, Bela Lugosi Jr. It was amazing. And at that conference, the Stoker family was represented by Laura Stoker. And we got to be talking, we got to be friends. And as we were going through the conference, we walked into this where they were selling books of every kind on Dracula. And I looked around and I said, "Boy, there must be like 50 sequels to Dracula." And I looked at her and I go, "How come there was never, like, no one in the family or never thought about doing a sequel?" And she said, "Oh, you can't mention Hollywood in any way to the Stoker family." Now, if you want, I'll get into why, if you want me to.
Sure, go for it.
Okay. So in 1931, Florence Stoker, Brahms' widow, gave the rights to Universal Pictures to turn the novel into a film from the play that John Boylston wrote, that Bela Lugosi starred in on Broadway. And they hired Bela Lugosi to play Dracula, and it was a huge hit, as we know, right? But they wanted to do a sequel. Now, Brahm had written a short story called Dracula's Guest, which Florence wanted to turn into the sequel. The studio didn't want to do that. Bela Lugosi was supposed to come back, but they weren't going to pay him what he wanted to be paid. So they decided to do it without him and do Dracula's daughter. And if you've ever seen it, there's a wax statue of Bela Lugosi dead in a coffin at the beginning of the movie. And Florence sued Universal, saying they didn't pay her for the rights. Now, here's where it gets tricky. At that time, in order to get a copyright established in the U.S., because Dracula was a British novel, you had to turn in 2 copies of the novel to the Copyright Office. The executives at Universal called their senator, who did a little research and found out that Brahm had only submitted 1 copy. And therefore, he was able to use his influence backed by the studio and the studio money and the campaign contributions that Universal made to the senator to force the Copyright Office to disavow Bram Stoker's copyright, and it went out of copyright.
Because of 1 copy missing.
1 copy missing.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. They said the copyright's no good. Now it's public domain. The studio got to make Dracula's daughter, and the every Dracula movie you've ever seen, not one penny went to the Stoker family or Brahms estate. Nothing. So Bela Lugosi signed away his image because he didn't speak English, and they got him to sign a contract. And his son, to this day, Bela Lugosi Jr., was an entertainment lawyer. Great guy, by the way. He's been fighting over billions of dollars of advertising and marketing and all the toys and all the movies that you see with Bela's image as Dracula, with the cape and the whole thing. You know, you know, they have never. Bela Lugosi's family's never seen a dime of that either. Universal owns it all, and they've been fighting for years. And the Stoker family did too, and then eventually they gave up. So as soon as I mentioned anything about a screenplay, a novel, anything with Hollywood, they were like, "No, they will never let you do this." But I pressed ahead and I started writing. Now, I knew Joe Dante. I had almost worked the years before on a movie for Dr. Dre and Ed Lover, the sequel to Who's the Man. We were going to do remake the Abbott and Costello movies for Universal, and I came up with the idea for Dr. Dre and Ed Lover meet Blackula as a comedy. Joe Dante loved it, but the first movie they were going to do was But Privates. So Who's the Man opened on the day of the LA riots and the Rodney King verdict, and no one went to see the movie, I guess because everyone was running for the riots on the coasts. So they dropped the Abbott and Costello movies, and But Privates became Pauly Shore in the Army, which we won't talk about because it was a terrible movie. But the screenplay that I wrote based on the sequel to Dracula. Now I had the historical Dracula screenplay and the sequel called Undead. I decided to call Joe Dante because I loved The Howling. And he read it and loved it and optioned it. And for the next year, he tried to make it. The screenplay went on and on. He didn't get it made. It was all Hollywood business nonsense. And I wound up working with Jan de Bont on an early draft of the shark movie Meg. And while I was working with Jan, we had remembered that we had met years before in Fox Searchlight bathroom, right? When Speed 2 came out. And we were both there pitching projects. And we cracked each other up because he went to shake my hand. And I said, "Oh, can we wash our hands first?" And he cracked up and he remembered me. And he said, "What else are you working on these days?" And I had just finished my first movie, Dr. Chopper, which became like this minor cult classic hit with Costas Bandalore starring in it. So he wanted to know what I was doing. I said, "I'm working on the sequel to Dracula." It was just, the option just ran out on Joe Dante. He goes, "Let me look at it." So I gave it to him. We started working on a movie version. And he said, "You know what would help sell the movie? If you wrote it as a novel." And I never thought about writing a novel. I thought it was, I'm a screenwriter. So if you ever saw a page of screenplay, there's not many words on it. It's just the dialogue, a lot of blank space. So all of a sudden I have to fill out that page. I was terrified. I was like, where am I going to get all those words from? Right. And I started writing, and then lo and behold, I get a call one day from Dacre Stoker, Brahms' great grandnephew. Laura had told him that she had met me a couple of years before at Dracula 97. And then I was thinking of doing a sequel, and I was interested in the family coming on board. He thought it was a great idea. And he asked me, like, how could that help the Stoker family? How could he sell it to his family? And I said, well, if you do a sequel, create a new copyright, establish a new copyright, anything that comes from that sequel is now owned by the Stoker family, right? Because a new trademark. They got very interested in that, and they called the Stoker estate in England. And Bram Stoker's grandson, who was running the estate, got very excited. And we pitched them the story that we had come up with. And we actually went to the Rosenbach Library in Philadelphia. Now, when Bram was writing Dracula, he actually wrote it in Philadelphia, by the way, not in England. Sorry, England. I know they don't like to hear that, but he wrote it in Philadelphia at the Philadelphia Hotel. And all his notes were written on napkins, on back of pieces of paper, and within those notes, there's a whole bunch of parts of the novel that didn't make it in or were edited out later. And we took those notes, even characters that he had exercised from the manuscript or exercised by the publisher, one or the other, and used those to create the sequel. The Stoker estate loved that idea. It was almost like Brahm was writing it with us, and they gave us the official sequel label. They officially endorsed us as there's maybe 100 sequels to Dracula or more. We're the official one now. And my manager went crazy. He said, "This is the greatest thing ever." And he went out and pitched it, and a bidding war started. And all of a sudden, I was an overnight success. We had the biggest first time author sale in history. And they paid us this big sum of money to all of a sudden, and they gave us an advance. And now I got really scared because I was like, "Oh, now I got to write it, and it's got to be good." So for the next 3 years, Dacre and I worked, and he was in North Carolina, I was in New York, was emailing back and forth, and we wrote a 1,000-page novel and sat down with an editor, got it down to like 800, and we got it released, and it actually got good reviews. People seemed to like it, most people. Um, there were some purists who were upset with things we did because one of the choices we made was to try and not only fix in Brahms' novel, Dracula is like kind of the historical Dracula, but not really, kind of made up, kind of historical part Attila the Hun, there's kind of a few characters in there. Ivan the Terrible is mixed in to the character that becomes Dracula in the novel. We took the historical Dracula and secured it to the legacy, so now it's one character, and, we sort of took some things from the movies that have become kind of like, if you haven't read the novel, when you read it, you realize that they've changed a lot in the movies. So we tried to merge it all together into one sequel to the movies and the novels, and we did that by making Brahm a character in the novel, and he hears the story about what happened to Jonathan Harker and Mina in the original and turns it into a novel, but of course, he got a few things wrong and a few things he made up. So that's how we were able to smooth over the differences, and of course, to some people, that's heresy, you know? But we wanted to create a novel that was for everybody because the book is so different than all the movies. In fact, I think the book, maybe the 2 closest is the, Louis Jourdan BBC miniseries, Dracula, and the, Jesse Franco, Dracula, which is the only time Christopher Lee played Dracula when he wasn't for Hammer Films. He did play it once, and that's with Klaus Kinski, who later played Nosferatu in the remake. He plays Renfield in it. He's fantastic. But if you haven't seen it, it's Jess Franco 1973 Dracula is amazing. But those are the 2 closest. So we try to smooth it over. A novel comes out and, we're getting these good reviews, and next thing I know, I'm traveling the world on a book tour, and the book sells over 2,000,000 copies. It's number 1 in France, Germany, and Spain. I got my name in lights in the Champs-Élysées at the Virgin Atlantic store. We caused a riot. We were only supposed to be signing books at the Virgin Atlantic store in the Champs-Élysées for like an hour. They kept us there and canceled the next book signing and called in the gendarmes because we were swarmed. We were swarmed. And, the French, this is really funny. I'll give you a little anecdote. So after we get done with this big book signing, we feel like, "Oh, wow, we're these big stars," right? We try to there's a club next door. We try to go into the club, and they go, "Oh, no Americans allowed." So put us in our place. Our heads were this big, and they've shrunk right down to, like, almost immediately. Good for the French, right? Didn't let us get away with anything. But, it became this huge thing, and oh, who knew, But it was the funny thing is everyone comes up to you and go, "You're an overnight success." Well, I'll tell you, it's amazing the success you've had, right? But I'll tell you, from the day that I saw that novel in on the TV show on Bravo, making of Bram Stoker's Coppola's Dracula, until the day the novel came out was about 12 years. So if 12 years of work is an overnight success, you know, okay, then I'll buy it. But it didn't seem that way. This was a lifelong journey that seemed that it was destiny. For the minute I saw that record in the window, it was this destiny that I was on. It was something I had to do. It was like a vision quest. Maybe Dracula was talking to me from beyond the grave or something.
Maybe Dracula was talking to you because you visited his castle and spent the night there, right?
Not only that, I didn't even tell this part. The professors actually excavated the grave as an archaeological dig, and we dug up Dracula's grave, which was pretty. Well, he was originally buried at the altar, which is the place of honor, but later his body was moved back, so to take out of that place of honor because he's got this bad reputation. And when we opened the grave, there was a dog in the grave, the bones of a dog. There was no body, but his cloak was there and his family brooch, the Bazarab family brooch, which we found really interesting. Where's his body? Which, if you believe in this stuff, then you're like, "Oh, he's walking around," you know? But, probably when he was killed, his body was sent to, the Muslims as proof of his death, and so it could have been his body was sent. Some people say it was just his head, but probably they buried all they had, and I don't know how the dog got in there. We still haven't figured that one out.
So let's dig into the historical Dracula, because I think people might be familiar with the Dracula, the novel or the movie, but not many people know the history of the real Dracula. So maybe you can give
The historical Dracula is quite a figure, and he plays in not only I know it's gonna sound crazy, but I'll explain this, I promise. He plays in not only the discovery of America, but his father and his legacy is directly related to the war in Kosovo in the 90s. It's, his life, um, although short and brutal, has huge implications for our modern history. And, he he was a principality, not a king. But Romania, which was then called Wallachia, was strategically placed right along the Black Sea. It was a dividing line between Christendom and the Muslim South and the Turkish Empire. So, because he was Orthodox, not Catholic, they were able to form like this. I guess if you were talking about Star Trek, it would be the demilitarized zone in space. Because they were Orthodox Christian, Catholic or Christian, Orthodox Christian. The Muslims used them as like the mediators, and they were the buffer zone between the two worlds that were destined to collide in the Crusades and everywhere else. So, Dracula's father, Dracul. Now, his father also was named Vlad. Okay. Now, Vlad, whose family's name was Bazarab, was brought in by János Hunyadi, the great Hungarian noble, to fight the Muslims, to keep them from coming into Christendom. There was a massive fight in what is now Kosovo, led by the great Muslim warrior Mezid Bey. There, Dracula and János Hunyadi defeated Mezid Bey. And instead of slaughtering all the Muslims that had crossed into Christendom and settled there, Dracula tried to make a peace. Dracula's father, tried to make a peace and said that the Muslims could stay there. And in return, the Christians would pay a homage to the Muslims, and the Muslims wouldn't come into Christian territory. And that was the peace. Janos Hunyadi and the Pope wouldn't stand for that. And they formed an army to overthrow Dracula's father and kill him. Now, just flash forward to 1992-3. Those Muslims that Dracula, the father, allowed to settle in Kosovo, or the Muslims that were put into the concentration camps and killed because the Serbs still to this day felt they didn't belong there. So that was a conclusion of Dracula's father's war, from all the way back in the 1400s. So that's how influential this family is. Now, the reason they called Dracula's father Dracul is the church had an order of knights, like the Knights Templar. You've heard of them, right? They were an order of knights called the Order of the Dragon. And the Dragon Order was formed to protect the Holy Roman Emperor and Christendom. Now, Dracul was Orthodox, but in order to fight with the Christians, they ordained him into this order of knights, the Dragon. So that's the Dragon Order, which is why Dracul in Romanian means dragon. Only problem is, right, a dragon is a symbol for the devil in Orthodox Christian culture and Romanian culture. That's where Brahm heard the dragon, the devil, and started to be interested in Dracula. Now, Dracula, it's really Dracula is the actual spelling of Dracula, which ya means son of. So Dracula, when his father died, became Dracula, son of the dragon, or in English, Dracula, son of the dragon and son of the devil, right? So the translation in English from our culture and Orthodox culture is son of the devil. And that's what Brahm heard, that this guy Dracula, son of the devil, that's perfect for my character in my novel. That's where he got it from. Now, Dracula was not killed when his father was killed. Instead, he was sent to live with the Sultan as a hostage. And so was his brother Radu. Radu became a harem boy and was gay and was sleeping with the Sultan. Dracula was put into a prison. He was educated and all that, but he was pretty much kept in prison his whole life. And at some point, there was a new ruler in Wallachia that didn't want to keep a peace and pay the tribute to the Sultan. Basically, the Romanian boyars were like, we don't want to pay this anymore. The boyars are like nobles in Western culture. And they released Dracula and sent him back with an army to take over Wallachia, and that's how he became prince. And then he turned on the Muslims and decided that he was going to build Wallachia. Dracula became what the United States is George Washington. He created a modern army, he enforced borders, he created trade rules and regulations, and created a modern state. And he did it very simply. He had said to the boyars who had betrayed his father, he invited them all to this big party at the palace. And he said, who amongst you would die for your country? And all the boyars raised their hands. And he goes, great. He poured oil in and burned them all alive. He goes, now you've died for your country. But he asked them first. Like where he told it, I didn't kill them. I asked them if they died for their country. They would. Now all their lands and money will go to rebuild a standing army, and we will never be invaded again. And this is how he created the army. Then he took all the poor and the middle class and gave them the boyars' titles, made a whole government that was completely loyal to him because everything they have now belongs to Dracula. And he decided that he was going to stop paying the tribute. And the Sultan at the time, Murad, decided he was going to invade Christendom and was going to kill Dracula and take out the Holy Roman Empire as revenge for Crusades and all this stuff. So he takes a 300,000 man invasion force to march on Christendom. And at this point, Christendom, the Holy Roman Empire, is split between Constantinople, the Eastern and Western empires, and they're all this infighting amongst themselves. The Orthodox, the Catholics, the Protestants, the this, the that, they're all fighting. They're all divided. Spain is fighting the Moors. It's a mess. Dracula's all alone, basically, and he says, "You shall not pass," just like Gandalf. You shall not pass. And so he only has 40,000 men, but he creates guerrilla warfare. The Muslims would sleep 2 men in a tent. So he would order his men to sneak into the camps of the Muslims, the Turks, crawl into the tent, and slit the throat of one of the men. So his partner would wake up in the morning and find his buddy with throat slit and dead, and they were terrified. He would take prisoners in the night, kidnap them, and hold them at this palace in Togovsky. He amassed over 40,000 prisoners. And at Chindia Tower at the Togovsky, he impaled all of them through the anus, out the mouth. They call it the Forest of the Impaled. And then he abandoned the palace and the capital and retreated to his Dracula's castle, the real Dracula's castle at Báthory. And the Murad marched up with his army, his 300,000 men, and said, "Any man who can do such things, I cannot defeat." And he turned around and took his army and left and turned to his boyfriend, Radu, Dracula's brother, and said, "You finish him." Radu took the last of his men, attacked Dracula in Báthory. Dracula escaped from Dracula's castle and wound up being taken prisoner by the Hungarians and held prisoner at Hunandora Castle, which, for those of you who don't know, if you've seen Nosferatu, the new Robert Eggers movie, the castle where Count Orlok is, that's Hunandora Castle where Dracula was in prison, which is a little piece of sidebar information. And Dracula stayed there for years until the Pope decided that they needed Dracula. There was going to be a new crusade. They had to fight back against the Christians, against the Muslims. They had to stop them. So they went to Dracula because they knew the Muslims were terrified of him. And they said to Dracula, "If you take the Catholic Mass into your heart and soul and become a Catholic, we will make you captain of the new crusade." Dracula had no choice. He'd stay in prison or become a Catholic. He agreed to that. And that's when his people turned against him because they're Orthodox, and now he is the devil, right? But he marries into Hunyadi's family. He marries Helen Szilagyi, which is a cousin of the Matthias Corvinus, who is the king of Hungary. And he winds up building an army for this crusade. This is how America plays into it. Ferdinand and Isabella in Spain just defeated the Moors, and they took all the spoils of the defeat, and they were wealthy with cash. The Pope sends out a message to all the kings in Europe that they have to turn over money to Rome to fund this new crusade, and that Dracula is going to lead. Dracula, the first part of this crusade is him to retake Wallachia. The Pope gives him an army, and he marches on Wallachia. His people, the warriors that he made, because now he's a Catholic, not Orthodox, they rebel against him. Dracula's killed, his head is cut off and sent back to Constantinople. Don't send your Christian Catholic people into our Orthodox land. Well, all of a sudden, Ferdinand and Isabella have all this extra cash. They don't know what to do with it. They don't have to send it to the Pope. That's the money that they use to fund Columbus's expedition to America.
So the great sacrifice of Dracula
Yes.
funded
Right.
America.
How America would
He's
fit.
the founding father,
Basically.
like the
Right.
literally founding father.
Yes. And one of the things Dracula was known for, if you crossed him, he would impale you. But he would also try to use mysticism. There were a lot of pagans still, this pagan mysticism to try and scare people. He would put a bowl at the bottom of the spike and the blood would drip down, and he would take his bread and dip it in the victim's blood and eat it to take in their soul and their power. Sort of like Highlander, when you cut off the head and the energy goes in. This was what he was symbolizing. So he was becoming stronger and stronger. Now you get son of the dragon, son of the devil, the drinking of the blood, the impalements, which is a stake. Stoker hears about all this and he says, perfect, this is my guy. And he started writing about him. And that's how Dracula became, historical Dracula became the fictional Dracula. And Stoker's the one who connected him to Attila the Hun, the scourge of Europe. Or the blood of Attila flows through these veins. That was all made up. He's not related to Attila at all.
It looks like you did more research than the original.
Yes. And to be fair to Bram, no one knew this stuff. It was the work of Radu Florescu, who's the actual descendant of Dracula's first wife, Roxandra. If you've seen Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Coppola version, she throws herself out the window and kills herself, Winona Ryder. That's his great ancestor. And he, knowing that it's his family, he did all this research. He actually got into the Vatican archives, which is almost impossible to do, and found Dracula's actual letters and put together this book, In Search of Dracula. So until Radu Florescu came along, no one really knew the true history of Dracula.
Which is after the novel was already.
Right, yeah. The novel was written in 1897, came out. So it was probably written in 1888, it was so forth from there. And, Bram could not have known, he never got access to the Vatican archives like Radu Florescu and Raymond McNally did. So be fair to Bram, it wasn't his fault.
Yeah, but in a sense, it's cool because you basically connected the real story of Dracula more in the sequel of Dracula, kind of like re-explaining.
Yes. And I pulled in as the villain Countess Elizabeth Báthory, the Blood Countess, who was a real historical vampire, and probably one of the greatest, serial killers in history, but a woman yet who killed other women, raped and butchered young peasant women, hundreds of them, to drink their blood and bathe in their blood because she thought it preserved her youth. But the crazy thing about all of this is she's actually Dracula, the historical Dracula's cousin, through the marriage to Helen Szilágyi.
Something is going on in this family.
Yeah, that's a weird family.
It might be a psychopathic trait tendencies. Even
I'd like to see their DNA. Did they have 23andMe back then? Can we look it up?
Yeah, well, maybe we need to dig their body, right?
Right.
The DNA, but since it's not there,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, what about this real vampire? Do you know her story? Like
Elizabeth Báthory? Yes. This was something that scared me to do, and in the end wound up being something I was really proud of. Elizabeth Báthory, the character that I created at that time, there was a backlash from the gay and lesbian community about a lot of serial killers in movies were gay, like Buffalo Bill was trans in Silence of the Lambs, and there were a few characters like that in the novels, and they were very upset about those portrayals. And I was trying to be very sensitive to that when I wrote Báthory. So I was a little nervous how she'd be received, because Báthory was one of history's most well-known lesbians, not because she was a lesbian, because she was a serial killer. So it was a little bit of a worry for me, and way her story is basically that she was forced into marrying a man who was much older. As she was considered one of the most beautiful women of her time, but she didn't like men. And she married a man who was much older than her. And when she refused to sleep with him, he raped her over and over again, beat her, abused her, until the point where she finally killed him. And then she inherited his wealth. And she tried to be with other women, and the villagers, the people, it was impossible. And I think that torment that she went through drove her a little mad. And somehow she had scratched herself and she smeared the blood, and it made her skin feel softer. And she started experimenting with drinking blood, smearing blood on her, and she became obsessed with it. And this is a woman that went under great psychological tortures, physical and psychological tortures. And she started asking the girls that worked for her to cut their fingers, put blood on her. That eventually led to the drinking the blood, which eventually led to her killing them, bathing in their blood. She would hang them upside down, and the blood would drip into like a bath, and she would bathe in it, and she would rape the girls. She would have them kidnapped, and the villagers, eventually caught on that it was her, and they walled her up. They couldn't kill her because she was a noble, so they walled her up in her bedroom, and she was there, I think until something like 40 years, she was held as prisoner in this room. And by that time, she was like 80. When one day they put the food in, it didn't come out, so they broke down the wall and they found her dead. But the story goes, the legend, who knows, that she looked as young as she did when they first put her in. So if that's true, I don't know, but she was she was definitely a woman that had gone through a lot, put it that way. So when I wrote the novel, I try to say that she wasn't born a serial killer. She was made one. It was her revenge that she wanted for the way the world treated her, for the backward thinking and the religious, dogma that had caused her this. And she wants to bring down the Catholic Church and take over the world. I mean, she's really like a megalomaniacal villain in this that Dracula has to stop because he kind of created her in a way, his cousin. And I was afraid I was going to get nailed for this, but but when we got to premiere the novel at Comic-Con that year, the gay community totally embraced it. They were absolutely wonderful about it because they had felt that the character was not a serial killer by nature. It was made a serial killer by bigots, racism, prejudice, lies, deceit, you know, religious dogma, all that stuff. And she reacted. She went insane and reacted. And there was a different take on that type of serial killer. So they embraced the novel in a big way, and it was great that they did. It was nice because I was worried. So
And in her case, is there historical evidence that she was a serial killer?
yes, yeah,
Actual,
yeah. I mean, there were hundreds of young girls that had disappeared, and they were taken to the castle. Like the villagers knew it, and the nobles did nothing about it until the villagers revolted. And then the nobles were afraid of a widespread revolt, and they couldn't kill her, so they took her prisoner in their own room. But she was never tried, but everybody knew it, and it's written that way. I mean, I can't say there was a court case brought against her because she was a noble. No one was going to do that, but they all knew.
yeah, because there is often in history there is these witches which were burned on a stake for false accusations very often, right? So I was wondering if I
No,
heard that story.
yeah, they had found bodies in the castle. All her servants, at one point, she couldn't get anyone to work for her anymore because they were all dead. So she actually sent out her men to kidnap young girls from the village. So the parents of the families knew that they were being kidnapped to work in the castle. And as far as anyone knew, they were kept at the castle, but they were really raped and murdered shortly after they went there, and they disappeared. Some bodies were found, some weren't. And I think people didn't want to believe it, and there was a lot of from the nobles out that was possible, and she'd deny it, and but where were her servants? I mean, people just don't vanish unless they get kidnapped by aliens or something. You just don't vanish like that. So I mean, it's pretty strong evidence. Like you could make a very strong circumstantial case. I think if we tried her today, the jury would convict her.
Mhm. Wow, yeah, so you have a long-term, lifelong interest in very scary stories, Dracula and the real vampire, and that also translates into your film work, right? It's and your
Yeah.
producer work and acting.
Yes. Like I said, I've always loved horror, and I'm a big proponent of horror should be the part of every child's life. I've lectured on this. I've talked about it. I think today we have a lot of kids with anxiety. I think they don't know how to face adversity. This need for safe spaces and not being able to debate. Everything has to be my way or you're canceled. I think, my generation was much more, I'd rather argue it out with you and have a really informed conversation, a debate, and see who wins or loses, put it up for a vote or whatever. I think today it's funny, my generation, which we were teenagers in the 80s, even though these movies were R-rated, and then I grew up in the heart of the horror world, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Night of the Living Dead, Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, all of that. Zombie, we could go on and on. But we could go into the movies. They didn't stop us. And I think my treatise on all this is when I was a kid, I started with the, Boris Karloff Frankenstein. I couldn't sit through it. I was scared, too scared to sit through it. But I didn't like not being able to sit through it. So I forced myself to watch it. And I watched the Abbott Costello meets Frankenstein, and then I watched Frankenstein again. And I forced myself to get through it. And when I got to the end, I felt such a feeling of accomplishment that I kept going back to wanting to see more and more scarier movies, modern scary movies. Night of the Living Dead, and then Dawn of the, even though they were rated X, some of them rated R. I got my parents to take me to see it because I wanted to go. And I felt like every one of them to sit through was this challenge. You face adversity and you get through the other side and you feel this, it's almost like a drug. You get this elation, like I made it, I got through it, and I'd see other kids sitting there with under the jackets under their heads and, they're crying and then parents got to take them out, and I forced myself to watch it, even though I was terrified. My hands were shaking. I was like cringing, but I forced myself to do it. And I think it made my character like I was able to go after the professor. I was able to go, after the directors that I wanted and the producers that I wanted and the book deal that I wanted and the Stoker family that I wanted and so many and my movie career, everything. Because I didn't grow up in Hollywood. I'm not a nepo baby. I have no connections to Hollywood. It was all by attrition, fighting for every inch of ground. And I really went in with no fear. And I think I owe a lot of that to horror. Horror was very influential in my life because it taught me how to face adversity and get over it. When real adversity happens, you revert back to, I can overcome this. I can get past this. I can beat this.
Mm.
And that's what horror taught me. And I think today, you parents are very adverse to letting kids see, R-rated movies and stuff. And I wonder if that's the right thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's a recurring theme in this podcast for some reason.
Yeah.
We are talking about so many different things, like completely different topics, but it's the first time somehow we're getting into this discussion of what happened with the current generation, with the younger generation, or that they don't seem to have any resilience, and that results in a lot of depression and anxiety. And 2 weeks ago, I talked to a war correspondent, Bill Gentile. He was saying that for him, which is extremely controversial thing to say, but I understand why he said it. For him, the war, witnessing the war was necessary. He literally said necessary to grow up. For him, it was necessary to go through the war. Um, for me, for example, I was also like very kind of shy kid, I think, like as a small kid, and not very brave. But for me, it was climbing. So I used to climb.
Yeah.
And one day, my friend, when I was 14, wanted to challenge me, and he basically removed the rope when I was like on very difficult overhanged climb. And he told me, and I looked down, he like dropped the rope.
Never look down, right?
Yeah, and it was like, oh my God, I will die. So this was like a start from like growing up, quickly within minutes.
Yeah.
And you have to have this challenge, even if it's risky. Otherwise, if you don't have any challenges, you don't grow up. And for you, this is first time I hear it. For you, it was horrors.
Yeah.
Going through horror films, right?
Yeah. And you can't, if you don't challenge yourself, if you allow yourself to be afraid, even dating today, how much trouble do kids have dating? I speak to my girlfriend's kids and my god kids, and they're terrified of rejection. Like, they're terrified they can't handle it. For me, I was like, oh, no big deal. I think it just teaches you to.
Do you think they're terrified of rejection because everybody was always terrified of rejection, or this is more, uh, what I observe? Like I'm a professor, right? So I teach students, and within the last 15 years, maybe 10 years, something changed. Like normally, I was in a class quietly working on something. Somebody come in, there is like a couple talking, and 10 years, 15 years ago, it would be like always it was. So the guy is trying to pick up a girl. He says something. She has said something. She's interested or not. Now, if you listen to these conversations, they're like ridiculous.
No, the fear of rejection is overwhelming for them.
Yeah, but it's like they preempt the questions. Like it's not like, hey, would you like to go for a coffee? It's like, I wanted to ask you something, but I'm not sure if I can ask.
Yes.
And it's okay if you are lesbian. So just tell me that I can ask this. But I was like thinking that maybe I could ask you if it's okay to ask. Maybe we could like go for a coffee. And if it's just, so what is this? Nobody will take it.
We've lost the line where being a respectful young man who asks a girl on a date, where that line is, and the girl respectfully declines or accepts, and you don't like re-ask her 10 times, and you don't harass her or stalk her, right? Just to respect. Oh, hi, my name is this. I would love to take you for a cup of coffee. And we have to get over. There's this idea that in kids today, like the kids that I know, they won't ask a girl out until they're in love with her, because it's disrespectful, because otherwise they're just objectifying her on her beauty or her sexuality or body, right? And they want to get to know them. And I think there's that line again between toxic masculinity and respectful young man, and that we should understand that all people, when they meet, it's based on a glance. Like, you could see a man or a woman in a glance and know you're attracted to them or not. Now, maybe that's true. If you're attracted, that means you probably want to sleep with them, right? But that doesn't mean you're going to, right? It just means you have an attraction. And what do you do with that attraction? You don't like attack them. You don't act like a jerk, but you can go up to them and say, hey, would you like to go for a drink or a coffee or lunch? And it's not disrespectful to ask that, because we should accept that it's, hey, you're an attractive person. I'm attracted to you. Would you like to go for a drink? Then you get to know the person at that meeting and see if there's something more that you want to continue knowing them. That's how relationships always worked. Today, it seems to be that if you have a physical attraction to someone, if someone is pleasing to your eye, then that somehow it's based on a sexual thing, and you can't ask that. I think we've mixed that up. We've crossed too many lines here.
Yeah. Well, because there is this attack on masculinity, ongoing attack on masculinity. There's no doubt about it, and there is some justification for it, right? Like,
Yeah.
there is a toxic masculinity that exists. It's like, I don't know, whistling on a girl passing by, or saying something nasty. Of course, it exists, and it always existed, and it's very bad. But what I mean, it went too far, right?
Yeah.
It's basically the idea that you can ask a girl out is already the question, would you like to go for a coffee, is already considered a toxic masculinity.
Right.
That's insane.
But it's like trying to tell a shark not to eat, you know, a seal. We are based out of our genetic DNA nature. A man is supposed, or a woman is meant to meet and have a relationship. That's part of our DNA. Now, some people may want to have a relationship, they may not. That's up to them. But, I mean, I was always taught if someone asked you out, I mean, even when I was a kid, right? And in college, I remember the first time a guy asked me out, I was like, I didn't know what to say. And I told my mom about it. I was like, "Oh, I got asked out. I was at NYU and I got asked out by a guy. What do I do?" I kind of just ran away, right? And I was like, "Oh, okay, sorry, no." And my mom said, "Well, take it as a compliment. Just tell him you're straight, and that's what you do, right? It's just you just be honest. It's not a bad thing that someone thinks you're attractive. It's just how they use that attraction, how they try to express that attraction is where the lines are. If they you just can't grab someone and kiss them, but you can ask them out, I think.
Yeah.
And those lines get blurred. Kids get frustrated and they get scared about how to react, how to do things. And when you're telling someone to do things against DNA nature, it becomes very difficult on them and it weighs on them psychologically and everything else. It's harder to make friends. But I will tell you, and this is something that was true when I was in high school, and it's true now. The best first date is a horror movie. It's the best way to make first date. Okay?
Yeah, I so disagree, and I will tell you after you tell me.
Okay.
I will tell you why.
All right. So most of the time when you go on a first date, right, you have to talk, right? And most people don't know what to talk about. They're afraid to talk about it. They would say the wrong thing. But if you go to a horror movie, right, 9 times out of 10, girl, boy, whatever, is going to go, "Oh, I'm afraid." And he's going to lean on you, cover up, right? Put your arm around them. It's okay. Don't worry. You don't have to look, right? By the end of the movie, right, you're at first base, you've broken through the barrier, and now you're closer with the person. It's easier to talk to them. You feel comfortable with them. You can walk out hand in hand, and it's a great way to break the ice on a first date. It's always been that way.
All right. So I have a contra example, some
Okay.
anecdote. So actually, my wife, you haven't met.
I met her.
Okay,
Met her briefly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very, very
So
nice.
this was our second date, not the first date. First date, I screw up even worse than this one. So the second date, I wanted, to impress her that I'm a filmmaker and I'm a climber and so on. It totally doesn't work for her, but I thought it will. And what I did, I invited her for a movie called 124 Hours. It's a story about a climber or like hiker who got stuck in a canyon and had to bite off of his hand.
Right.
Okay, so it's not a horror, but it's pretty close. It's very horror, right? Oh my God, it was a disaster. So I thought it would be a movie about like a hero. Like I do that too. Oh my God, no, it was the opposite. He was stuck in this canyon and had to bite off his own hand. So she was like, "This is disgusting. Let's like go out. I don't want this." It was a complete disaster, and I think it would be honestly the same with her. If I took her to a horror film, we can't watch. We watched Old Boy recently, and she was like, "This is disgusting. He's cutting off his tongue like that," and that's the only like really gore scene there. So it depends. Maybe the New York girls are they pro?
Maybe, it's how you play the situation. It's okay. It's all right. We can
Just
still
don't need to look.
You don't need to look. I'll cover your eyes. It's okay. and that could work for you. You don't know. You got to try.
Well, it did work. We got married.
So see, I declare victory.
Maybe you're right. But there is.
But see how we got closer, because he was like, even if you agreed with her, you took her out to see you were protecting her from the horrors, and you left with her if you did watch the movie, right?
I think what was impressive about you when you did it was that you basically didn't get scared, because you had all your scares when you're.
I was.
So she's like really scared, and she feels like your pulse is like calm, no issues. Like, I can protect you. It's a proxy for warrior, right?
Right. And what do we want in a mate? Someone who makes us feel safe and comfortable, right? So me being able to watch the horror movie with both my eyes open, without it under the covers, right? I'll protect you. It works. Try it.
Yeah. Okay.
Instead of texting back and forth from across the table, try communication.
Yeah, and and it's easier than talking for 2 hours if you don't know
each other. Yeah,
don't
right.
have a good.
And
stories.
like actors, writers, producers are like usually the worst first dates ever.
Again, I disagree.
You know why, right?
Why?
Because we're always selling. We got to sell our stories, all this. So you wind up talking about yourself and all the things you're doing because you're used to. It's not like you're pitching your work. When you go out for work in Hollywood, you're pitching yourself. So you're pitching your movies, the things you're working on, all this stuff. What kind of parts I play, my training as an actor, what films I worked on, what cameras I trained on.
So right. That's exactly what I did on this first disaster day with my wife, but it worked. Again, you know what I did?
That's why you're married. It worked. They're perfect for
I
each
am
other.
so not known filmmaker. Like, nobody knows about me, right? I barely have any movies. So what I did in the first day, I take her to a restaurant, and after we went to theater for an Irish play, and she didn't speak English enough to understand the Irish, so she fell asleep. So that was the first disaster. And I told her that the filmmaking is divided into two eras: the pre-Pietroszek era and the post-Pietroszek era, and Pietroszek. Right. So I told her that, like, yeah, I think that, like, the change, the new era in cinema, and she listened to it, and she was like, "This guy is so self-confident with no looks, no money, so self-confident. He must be successful in the future."
See,
That worked.
that's fake it till you make it, right? That's what you have to do in this industry, right? And then, so some people it works on, some people are like, oh, I can't get a word in edgewise. Like, first date, I realize I'm talking for like a half hour, and I'm like, well, tell me about you. She goes, oh, I'm exhausted now. I'm gonna go home.
Yeah. Yes, this confidence is important. Do you know the story how Roman Polanski got his first Hollywood movie?
No.
The $100. So it's supposedly true. Like, he confirmed it a few times. So he was, poor Polish filmmaker. He came from Eastern Europe. He did some movies which were very successful, but definitely had no money. So he's invited to a meeting with a producer like you, and he comes in, and they were sitting by a table in a restaurant, and the table was moving. So it was super annoying because the table was moving all the time. So Polanski takes out $100 bill, flicks it, like, and puts it under the table to hold the table so it doesn't move, right? And the producer supposedly was impressed with the guy who doesn't care about the $100 bill. It's like 1970s or earlier, right?
Right.
Yeah,
It had to be the 60s.
60s, right? Yeah, exactly, because he already the Chinatown. Yeah, exactly. So a lot of money. Now, then Polanski came back, of course, to this restaurant and got this $100 bill because that was the only money. That was all the money here, all of it. Okay, so it shows the confidence, right? So
Right. Again, fake it till you make it. Like, he had all this a whole pocket full of hundreds. No worries.
yeah. Did you do any stunts with people?
So there was a girl I really liked in college. I wanted to get a date with her. And she was notoriously, not wanting to date a fraternity brother. So I finally got a date with her, and I was going to play a trick on her. When we went back to the fraternity house where I was living, I asked the little sisterhood, and for them, when I come up, all of them should come over and talk to me. Like, are we going out Friday? Are we going to go out Tuesday? What day are you free? I want to see you again. Right. And this girl comes up with me, right? Because that's the reputation of all fraternity brothers, right? We're all like sleeping around with all these women and stuff, and she was apprehensive about dating anyone from a fraternity. So we came up in the elevator. They go, Ian, and they all come running over, right? They played their parts beautifully. And this girl, her face was horrible. And all of a sudden, I just started cracking up. We all started laughing. And they're like, it's just, wait, this is a put on? I go, yeah, you see, not all fraternity brothers are what you think. And she thought that was great. And we went out for a while, so it was cool. But that was a good one.
Yeah, that is a cool way to.
Yeah, I figured break the ice on it because I really wasn't like that. But, I guess they've all seen Animal House or something, and they think that's what all fraternity brothers are.
So that's like one of many Hollywood stories with from the past. What do you think is happening? What is the situation of industry right now? How do you see it?
Well, that's my new venture. I've started a new streaming service called MovieView, movieview.com, movieview.com, MOVIVUE.com. And it's a indie horror streaming site. Now, we have a lot of shorts that we put up there for free, so you can cruise around and see all the great new horror shorts. But the purpose of it is the state of filmmaking today is really difficult, especially for independents like me. I've always rather, I've worked in the Hollywood system, but I love independent film. I like making movies that are about something and not based, story decisions and character decisions based on a marketing plan. And today, well, let me go back. In the 80s, we had theaters, right? And a lot of those theaters were independent. And even in the big chains, you could get a distributor to put a movie in theaters, right? And there were always lots of independent movies like Madman, and especially in horror, there were a lot of independent films. All the blaxploitation films in the 70s were all independent. Dolomite, Sweet Sweetback's Song, and Shaft, and all the others at the period. Superfly, but all American independent. They were called, the studio that did a lot of them. But as those theaters now have gone away, and we had VHS and beta and then DVDs and Blu-rays to sell the physical medium. So you were always able to get your independent films into markets. And they had distributors that would pay you money for them and distribute them, and they would charge for them, and you would make money. Today, everything's owned by the streamers. The streamers are owned by big corporations, and they produce their own content, so they don't need to buy content. When they do buy content, it's usually just the big movies that win the festivals, and a lot of those movies that win the festivals are made by mini majors like A24, Blumhouse, and so forth. And they put them into the festivals, and they dominate the festivals. There are some that get through, but it's a small amount. I mean, you used to have huge sales markets like American Film Market, Berlin Film Market. There were thousands of films. Now maybe 1 or 2% get through. Well, everyone else, the distributors put them out there for free, and you got to press the button. You get a few cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
Because the distributor gets money, everyone around the line. By the time it comes to the filmmaker and everybody takes their cut, you're getting pennies on the dollar, a few cents, and it's almost impossible to make your money back.
Yeah. I produced one feature film as a producer, and it was ridiculous. These deals were ridiculous.
Yeah.
On the online streaming, it's just unbelievable. You cannot make an ultra low budget film budget back.
Yes, and here's the dirty secret of Hollywood. No matter what they tell you, no one knows what's going to be a hit. Nobody. The audience decides that, not some guy in a studio exec suite. You could put all the biggest stars, Ishtar, you could go Heaven's Gate. You can go on and on with movies with tons of stars and all the biggest people behind it, and they still stink, or the audience doesn't accept them. The Cotton Club, right? Over and over again, there were movies. The Fall Guy just recently, right? Which one? the second, the Marvels, right? For some reason, the audience just, all the stars, all of the money in the world can't make the audience go see a movie. And sometimes they're not even bad movies. They're just, the audience isn't in the mood for it, right? You never, and some little weird movie becomes a huge hit out of nowhere, right? It's the streamers, because they make their own stuff and no one knows what's a hit, they chase the shiny object. So if the substance is a body horror movie, now every body horror movie is being bought by the streamers, or they're making their own because now body horror is a big thing. If love story comes out, oh, now every movie's a love story, and it's got to have the same type of story. They chase the money, right? Instead of engaging the audience, they chase the reboot, the branded product, the sequel, the remake, all that stuff, because the best-selling book, whatever, they keep doing it over and over and over again to make money. But where does all the greatest movements in film started with the independents. So specifically for horror, there was no such thing as zombies. Zombies were, these guy like Bela Lugosi in White Zombie would rise up the dead body and make it a slave to them, right? There was no like zombie movies that we know them today, eating the flesh and all of that. That was created by George Romero, a college kid who wanted to make a scary movie in 1969, right? Huge independent hit. You have right after that, you have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? No one has seen a documentary style vicious horror movie like that. That was it was really, about the conservatives versus the liberals over the Vietnam War. I mean, the hippies were the bad guys, they were idiots in it, right? And the people in the small town who lost their jobs, right, over the economy, they became cannibals. I mean, there's so much in Texas Chainsaw Massacre that you could talk about in film class forever, but it's an independent film that started that. Then you had Halloween, you had Dawn of the Dead, Hills Have Eyes was the mutant killer movies, and then you had Last House on the Left. There would be no Hostel without Last House on the Left. That started the torture porn movies, right? It was I Spit on Your Grave, right? The feminist movement movie, right? Where the girl is raped and she goes and kills the guys who raped her, right? And then they're right in the middle of the feminist movement, and the Roe versus Wade in the 70s, right? So all those movies that's created these genres, even The Car, right? There was a movie about a possessed car. There was a bunch of them, right? After that. So all these came out of independent film. Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, every one of them. Like, there would be no Friday the 13th because that was a studio film by Paramount. If and they got the guy who directed it was the producer of Last House on the Left. Last House on the Left was Wes Craven. That's how he got to do The Hills Have Eyes and then Nightmare on Elm Street. All these directors, Tobe Hooper, John Carpenter, George Romero, all these guys, these independent guys created these movements. And then Hollywood and the studios jumped on board and started copying what they were doing, but they led the movement.
Yeah.
Now there's no place without theaters, without VHS, DVD. There's no place for those movies to play and the audience to find what they want. They have no say in it anymore. They're being force-fed junk by the streamers and the studios, and there's no place for the next Star Wars. Star Wars may have been made by a studio, but nobody wanted to make it. Lucas got it made. When he did THX 1138 was a student film which got picked up and made with Robert Duvall. He brought along Spielberg and Coppola. There's no, and De Palma. There was no De Palma. With his little independence that it started his career, it changed the way thrillers are made. He brought giallo to America. The woman in the black coat and the knife. All of that would never have happened if there wasn't a place for independent film. And that's why we created MovieView.com, MovieView.com. It's the one place now where independent movies can come. The audience knows where they are and they can watch them. And they can decide if it's a hit or not. They can pick the next genre. If someone comes over with a new genre of horror film, they get to choose it. And 50% of the money, you hit the button on Movie View, 50% of the money is going to the filmmakers. It's an even split. And that makes all the difference in the world, because if enough people come to Movie View and enjoy the horror, the filmmakers get the money. And that's why we call Movie View, like, the catchline is join the horror revolution, because horror exists because people keep reinventing it, new ways to scare you. In the 80s, it kind of died out for a while because the studios got involved and everyone was making horror movies. And every Friday there was a horror movie. They weren't doing anything original anymore. There was a glut of studio stuff. Now we have a chance again to keep the originality of people's ideas and visions going. And with the free shorts, you could find, if you get on now, Movie View is backed by Wealth of Geeks, which we have like 180 million hits a month on different websites through MSN web pages. We have CNN affiliates and cultural websites, newspapers, all through the Midwest and wherever. So we advertise the films. Today, even if you get a distributor deal and they put you on Amazon or on pay-per-view, that advertising, no one knows you're there. You're on page 3 after the Tom Cruise movie, but for Movie View, we'll advertise the movie. We curate the movies. We find the best stuff. We don't just put anything on. Right? We watch the movies. We curate them. We put the best stuff, and we pay the filmmakers a good fee, and we publicize them so people know that they're out there. And we also produce films. It's one of the offshoots of Movie View is Ideal Films. They're one of the producers of my new movie, Psychopathy. And they take their money and put it behind the short filmmakers. When someone keeps watching a short, we get all the numbers. We know who's interesting, right? The audience likes this director, this type of thing. They bring us a script that works within our budget range, we'll make it, because we're catering to the audience, not to some marketing plan.
Yeah, that sounds great, and I think it might work out because I'm getting tired with the traditional streaming. Initially it was kind of okay, like you had Netflix, right?
Right.
And basically you subscribe to Netflix, and you would find most commercial, at least, films and some indie films there. Many of my friends put their films there. They got very little money though, like literally sometimes $5,000.
Yeah.
For a feature, which is ridiculous. It doesn't pay anything, right? And then now, if you want to watch something, you have to be subscribed for 20 different services.
Yeah,
which becomes unsustainable, right?
And also it kills theaters, because
Yeah.
if you're paying $25 for commercial-free Max and $25 for commercial-free Netflix, and you got $25 for commercial-free Disney, Hulu, ESPN, and $20 for commercial-free Paramount and Showtime, right? Well, all those 25s, add up to about $125 a month. Now, if you're paying $125 a month, how much money do you have left to go to the theaters? And the window between theatrical release and streaming release, or pay-per-view and then streaming, is weeks. So if I can wait a couple of weeks, if I go to the theaters, by the time I get dinner and popcorn, just take my stepson or my girlfriend, it's almost $200, right? It's easier for me to buy a big thing of Orville Redenbacher popcorn and a popcorn popper for $30, make a big bowl of popcorn, or go to the grocery, get a couple of hamburgers, make that. I get a great dinner, and me and my girlfriend and her friends and their boyfriends and their girlfriends can all come, and we all hang out and watch a movie together on streaming or pay-per-view, and it costs $20, or $25 for the month if you're streaming. It doesn't make sense to spend the money to go see it in theaters.
Yeah, but there is a social aspect to go to cinema, right? First of all, if you are watching a comedy, let's say, laughing with 300 or 200 people together is different than laughing.
What comedy makes it in the theaters anymore?
Yeah, true.
We become, again, If we made an Animal House or a Vacation or any of the great classic comedies the last few years, people would be saying that there is a lot of humor in there that's offensive.
Oh yeah, that's another huge
And I don't think you can.
offensive humor.
Yeah, you can't have humor without breaking eggs. That's the whole point of humor. It's to cross. Could you imagine if someone released Blazing Saddles today?
I cannot imagine 90% of movies being released
Right.
today.
And especially, what we don't know about that movie is Richard Pryor wrote half of it. Mel Brooks' name was on it, but Richard Pryor wrote half of it because he thought a movie would be too controversial if his name was on it. But I mean, there was a free use of the N-word or all these things, but it was a parody to show the ridiculousness of using that word and how it's used and all of that, right? The racists in the movies were the biggest idiots, right? But we can't have that kind of satire and parody today because people would be upset just by so comedies become very difficult to release.
Do you think it is ending? I have a feeling this insanity is kind of ending now. Maybe not in New York, but worldwide, and like in the rural America, like here.
Well,
It seems to be like people want the humor back,
I
the inappropriate jokes.
I agree that stuff should be R-rated. I mean, it could confuse a kid if he hears it, he could repeats it, kids are parrots. But I think when we get to be 18, again, it goes back to horror. Get a little backbone. You don't need a safe space. I can exist. I can live in a space that's not safe. I can hear a bad word.
Just don't watch it if you don't like it. If you're sensitive, just
If you don't like it, don't walk out. But that doesn't mean, just it's part of speech, especially free speech, which we don't talk about enough, is the ability to sustain hate speech, bad speech you don't like. If you say, I cannot say this because that's bad, then it's not free speech anymore. You have your right not to listen to it. You have your right to walk out, but you can't shut someone down for saying it.
yeah.
Right?
There was I just had a talk last week about the free speech. So there was a program, if you've seen 60 Minutes at CBS, discussing German's law against hate speech. They basically arrest now people for offending politicians. If you use a negative, vulgar word on a politician, you get arrested.
Oh, didn't that happen in Congress the other day? A friend to arrest a congressman who berated or degraded Trump and Musk. I mean that's right.
And what I was so it's one thing. It's good that you report on it. But what I was very moved by was that then the um, the CBS, which I would consider liberal, said, "Well, no surprise, since Nazis got to power by weaponizing free speech, that is total bullshit. Nazis got to power because there was censorship of speech. Not only because there's million other reasons, the economical situation, so on. But there was such censorship that Goebbels was in prison, Hitler was in prison. There were fights against the hate speech of Nazis. And the reason why they got to power is because it became attractive, because it is like forbidden.
Well, also they turned it on its head. They said, well, you're telling me not to speak, right? Why are you stopping me from speaking? Are you afraid of what I have to say?
Yeah,
Maybe he's a true.
maybe true.
Yeah.
Exactly. You need to like, it's so easy. If you read Mein Kampf, which is the dumbest book written but in history, it's just so unbelievably stupid, right? If you read it, you can argue it. You don't need to be educated to just destroy every argument in it because it's so dumb. But you have to be allowed to do it. You have to have this Nazi in front of you and call him an idiot and like showed why he is stupid by logical argument, and then nobody will be a Nazi, right? But because you forbid it, because you hide it, because it's a hate speech, then you don't have this ability.
Everything has a reaction, and and when you talk about anything, whether it be movies or whatever, or the state of movies, you have to talk about what if you do this happens.
Yeah.
Like even with movies, right? We talk a lot about possibly tier pricing. So if you go see Avatar, which costs $200 million to make, fine, charge $25, right? But if you go see Anora, which costs $10 million to make, maybe charge $10 for it. And now maybe that'll get people back to the
That's a
theaters.
brilliant idea. You know, if I remember correctly, it's not my era, but if I from the history of industry, it used to be the case before the blockbuster disaster kind of happened. But well, it also kind of triggered the indie filmmaking. It used to be the case that the studio would allow the directors to do low budget movies as artistic movies for
Yes.
every big budget movie they made, right?
Right.
That was famous for Spielberg, right? And
That's how Star Wars got made. There's
Yeah.
like, he did American Graffiti, and the guy, and David Allen Jr. famously said, I don't understand the script at all, but if it gets you to make your next movie at my studio, I'll let you make it.
so why do you think, like, do you think the streaming is the reason that this model is gone?
I think the star system and the star director, studios can't control them. So we no longer make stars because we don't want to have a star and pay him $25 million or 40% of the box office, you know, to get a movie out. I mean, look what happened to Wolves, right? They had that star contract. Nobody wanted to take the movie because they were going to George Clooney and Brad Pitt were going to get too much of the box office. So they put it on streaming and never put it in theaters because it was a different pay structure. You know, Jack Nicholson, famously took less money to do Batman, but he took like 40% of the budget or something and wound up with hundreds of millions of dollars instead of 10 million that they were going to pay him, right? Because they wanted to save money on the front end in case it was a bomb because no one knew if Batman would work. Right? So, the studios today, like Coppola, right? When he went off and did, the Apocalypse Now, he spent months in the desert, went way over budget, had 10 hours of footage, and to cut it down. He's still making cuts of the damn thing. It's like 4 hours, 3 hours, 2.5 hours. There's all these different cuts around, and each one is this is the full vision. This is the final cut. Ridley Scott's still cutting all his movies over and over, and I'll tell you, it's like if you've ever seen Kingdom of Heaven, it's but if you see the 4-hour version, it's magnificent.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, that's another. Even with my limited experience, I experienced this terrible influence of the distributors and producers on the director's vision. You know, I had a deal with a TV channel I won't name, with a very cool comedy, and this is my worst movie. And the reason is not that I failed in as a director in this case, because others should, but because they recut it. Because they
Yeah.
recut it, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is unwatchable."
Yeah, because they did to Once Upon a Time in America. Sergio Leone, one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. They cut his 4-hour movie down to a 90 minutes. You watch the 4-hour version, it's like one of the greatest movies. They didn't want directors telling them what to do because in the beginning, Hollywood was run by filmmakers who were also businessmen. But somewhere this became about debt management, finance, and all of that. They're part of big conglomerates where they brought in business people over the artistic. And the guys that had the power to fight back, Coppola and these guys, they didn't want to let them make movies anymore. I mean, Coppola couldn't get Tucker made. He had to make a deal to do Godfather 3 to get Tucker made. And then when he did Godfather 3, they go, oh, he's going to spend too much money. We won't wait for Winona Ryder to get over her. She was sick in the hospital. We won't wait 2 weeks for her. We won't pay an extra $2 million to get Robert Duvall to come back. So they start making the movie. They have to rewrite the script while they're making the movie, bring in George Hamilton to replace, Robert Duvall. And you're sitting there wondering, like, did you really want this movie made, or did you just want the name of the movie in the theaters so you could say, I made Godfather 3, and people would show up in the first week or two, and you get all your money up front, and then the hell with the movie if it's good or bad.
Yeah, this happens. I can understand it because of the cost of the movies, right? When movies were a million, 2 million, and you make 10 million, or even 3, 4 million, that was like you could do a lot and just test the market and making profit. But if something costs 200 million, then you're literally bankrupted if it flops.
Imagine today, forget about horror, forget about anything. Imagine Rocky coming out today. Who would see it? How would you see it? It would disappear. And how many billions did they make off Rocky all these years? They're still making Rocky movies. Now they're doing Creed. Then they're going to do Drago, right? And they'll probably do Drago Jr. and, whatever. But the point is, you don't know what's going to be a hit. So, I mean, yes. I mean, if a director comes to you and he says, my movie's going to cost $40 million, right? And you start making the movie and he's way over budget, well, maybe rein him in. Did anyone rein Coppola in? I mean, but you got to let the artists be artists and take chances. Do you want to keep seeing the same movie over and over again? That's what you do with the studios. They're remaking everything again and again and again. It's like, how many versions of Nosferatu have we had now? I love this one. Don't get me wrong. I love it. It's an original movie. It's got a vision. It's a director's movie, and I love it. But, how many more times are we going to see it?
Yeah, and also the sequels. It's just you did a good sequel of a novel, but
Right.
but the sequels of movies are just
Well, there's something to be said when a certain amount of time has passed, like Top Gun. It's cool to come back.
yeah, sure. That's
Right.
a good example.
Right.
It was not bad.
Yeah, and they spent years developing that script. Years. They didn't just slap it together. How many times does a movie come out and 2 years later the sequel's out? Right? You put when you do the first one, you're probably putting 3, 4 years into it, right? Like, look at Iron Man 2, right? Iron Man took 3 years to make. They rushed Iron Man 2 into production in 2 years, and it couldn't be done, right? They didn't have the technology and all that. Now, then they created a machine and they're pumping them out 3, 4 a year, and the quality over time has gone down.
Yeah. And it seems like just because some proportion of the audience is faithful to the brand and will watch it, they don't see it immediately in the revenue, right? They see, oh, the movie did well. Well, it did well because the first movie was good, and we watched the second movie because of the first movie. It's not because the movie was good. We still wanted to do it, right? But that dies over time. It destroys the whole brand.
Think about it. We're still making movies that are sequels and requels and reboots from stuff from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. If we don't create some new stuff, like we're trying to do at movieview.com, where's the next sequels and all that? This stuff it's like the snake eating its own tail. Eventually people are gonna go, I've seen this a million times, I don't want to see it again. And the people stop going to the streamers.
Yeah, and do you think the streaming is, because we cannot be so negative about the streaming, like it does destroy the distribution. That's no doubt. It's a complete changed the distribution of films, made indie films extremely difficult. But the quality of films coming from the streaming platform is not that bad, I would say, compared to like a traditional Hollywood.
Probably, yeah. I would say some of them are good. Especially the series. I think the series are even better than the movies. But I get this feeling from them that it's unsustainable because there's a price of living. Rents are going up. Like, when we were young, we had rent, we had a landline, and there was no cable. There was an antenna, right? Then cable comes along, right? Then the phone answering machine you gotta buy, then the cell phone and flip phones, and now you got the cell phones, the watch, the internet, you've got cable and streaming because you can't get certain stations on without the cable, or you can cut the cable and go to YouTube, and they tell you, or, the Sling TV, right? And they tell you, "Oh, yeah, it's only $40 a month." Great, you get, like, no channels. They purposely put the channels that you want in 2 separate packages, so you have to upgrade to the bigger package, so it's really $88 a month just for the regular TV that you need. Then you have the streaming, and all that money plus the higher cost of food and everything that goes on with natural inflation over time, and you wind up pricing the average person out of the market.
Yeah.
They can't afford it at some point, and the system collapses in on itself. There has to be a way to create a space between a movie, it's in the theaters. We used to wait a year or more before it came out on VHS or beta, right? Now, I mean, it was like 5 years before Star Wars came out, right, on VHS. Now, if you create that window and you find some way to bundle these services, you know, and pay one price for them, and if you could get those cable channels into that price and you say, "What's the price we could afford?" Let's say you pay $100 a month, you get all of it, right? Maybe then things will start to change.
So you think there will be a consolidation? Because that's exactly my experience too,
Yeah.
right? Like I would pay for Netflix because I could find everything. Now I have to pay for HBO just because I want to rewatch Game of Thrones.
Right.
Nothing else, right? Almost.
Yeah.
So I'm paying like monthly fee to be able to one day.
Well, even if
I
you
can buy it, right?
even if you get Max, let's say you like Bill Maher's show, right?
Yeah.
Or you like something on Discovery.
Yeah, but I'm paying for one.
Right, but you're paying for cable, right? You're paying for cable,
and
and then
Yeah.
you have to wait a day or two after it airs on cable to see it on streaming. So you have if you wanna watch it the day of, you have to get cable too. So even if you wanted to get rid of CBS, NBC, and ABC and all that, now you can get some sports shows on one network and some on the other, some on Amazon, right? And then you need TV for others. If they don't get their act together where you can get everything that you want or pick a la carte for your own tastes and get, don't tell us which channels to pick. Say you get 20 channels for this price on YouTube TV or Hulu TV or whatever. You get to pick any 20 channels you want. It's like basic cable used to come with news. Now, if I get basic cable, I don't even get CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, right? I got to pay extra for the news package. It's all set up to get you to upsell. And instead of consolidating, which is what's going to happen, just like beta went away, VHS took over. VHS went away, DVDs took over, right? DVDs went away, Blu-rays took over. Blu-rays went away, 4K took over, HD took over, right? And now that went away. Eventually the market cannot sustain itself.
But that would result in a consolidation, not
Yeah.
consolidation, because people will start to bug up. Like
It's already starting to happen. Like you got Hulu, which used to be a separate service. Now it's bundled with Disney Plus, and now the new thing, which I'm really hopeful about, is you have
movienews.com.
MovieNews.com. You've got Hulu, Disney Plus, and you have Max all in one bundle. That's starting to congeal and make sense.
I don't follow this because I canceled all the subscription. I just use Prime
Right.
and just watch individual films, which I can usually get there, and so I don't follow it. So that's interesting. So it's already happening because
Yeah.
it would have it's natural, would have happened. Do you think this will in any way positively? Is there any hope for independent filmmakers?
Yes.
How do we get
MovieView.com.
how do we get our movies made?
Oh.
This is for horror, but for
Or, I mean, you have to be really, really, really tenacious and smart. And I just was at the Winter Film Festival in New York, and I spoke to young filmmakers, and they asked me the same question, and I told them, everything you know is wrong. Everything you were taught in film school is wrong. Don't write the great script and try and sell it. Nobody knows what's good. No one knows. They'll chase. If you wrote the last great movie, they'll come after you. If you write a movie that's just like the next great one, like the last great one, they'll buy it. Maybe once in a while they'll see something so incredible they'll buy, but it's very rare. The better way to go is to stop trying to make money off your films, your early films. Instead, start with how much money you have. Work backwards. So if I've got $10,000, let's say, I'm going to make a movie for $10,000, and then I write it to fit that budget. Example, if I want to write a zombie movie, well, if you can't do the makeup effects that they have to match The Walking Dead that they get on cable every day, right, every week, how are your movie gonna compete, right? So, don't use zombies. You heard of Havana syndrome?
Mhm.
Maybe it's a sound that turns people crazy and they wanna eat each other. Who knows? They don't have to be zombies. You darken the eyes, some blood in the mouth, and you have blood coming out of the eyes and the ears from the sound, and now they're zombies. They just don't look like they're not rotting zombies. They're just crazy people, right? But it doesn't cost as much. Design your films for the budget you have. If you tell me I don't have cameras, I don't have lights, I don't have anything, I gotta use my cell phone, well, kids record themselves all the time. I would put the hand of the or put the cell phone in the actor's hands and have them shoot the movie like it's being shot for the cell phones, edited almost like a found footage movie, all from cell phone
Well,
footage.
and if you have an iPhone or even some Androids, you have better camera than most people come to our keys.
Yeah.
Maybe except for 5 to 5 millimeter, but really, it is amazing what.
Why write a movie that takes place in Los Angeles if you live in Philadelphia? You know, right? If you live in Philadelphia and write about something taking place in Philadelphia. If you want to write a movie, you live near a woods. All right, now I'm lost in the woods. Start there, and it doesn't cost anything. You just go into the woods and shoot it. You work backwards to design. Look, also there's scheduling, right? You give me $10,000, I'll schedule a movie. That if you've got 5 people in a movie, right? Those 5 people, if it's a horror movie especially, they're only gonna last so long. So you shoot all the scenes with all 5 first, and then you kill them off one by one. You shoot it out of order so that you get all the scenes with everyone else that survived out of it as fast as possible, and then with the final girl and the second to last girl, whatever, you shoot all that stuff
And
last.
as you kill them all, you don't need to feed them,
I
right?
don't need to feed them, I don't need to pay them, I don't need to give them a hotel room, I don't need to put them up.
Yeah, I know. You know the Blair Witch Project. This is a famous horror. It was done for 30,000, right?
Yeah.
Something like this.
Yeah, I mean, you give me any number, I'll write a movie that you can just make it great, right? Just you don't have to spend a lot of money. You gotta be creative. John Carpenter once said, "The worst thing that ever happened to him was someone gave him a real budget." He lost all his creativity.
Yeah, I experienced that too. My best films are the cheapest, and my
Yeah.
worst films are the most expensive.
Because it forces you to be creative. I mean, and today, what's coming with AI, Unreal Engine, and all these systems to create films and CG imagery in films, you're gonna be able to do stuff on a low budget. And then once you make the film, stop trying to make money off of it. Use it as a calling card to get an agent, to get yourself noticed. You know, you go to film freeways, put it in a few film festivals, win a few laurels if you can, and then send it out to the agents. Don't worry if it makes money on if this is your calling card. I can do this. Let me get
Making
a
money on short films is out of question.
out of a question.
Question.
Short film. But if you make a
Uh,
feature film, even if it's cheap, as long as it looks good, right? Send it out. I mean, even you could the things that I would do to get agents. I mean, like I would go to Peter Luger's, a big steakhouse in New York, and get like a $300 gift card. I'd put it in with the disc of the movie, and I'd send it to the agent. Say, please watch my movie and give me a call. What you think? Dinner's for you and your wife are on me. Right, and 9 times out of 10, I get a call.
well, that's a
It's
interesting.
it's worth more to do that than it is to go hire a PR agent. And sometimes they're not gonna always sign you, but they give you interesting notes and you create a friendship. They say, "I'd love to see what you do next," and you try something else. You gotta be there's no way to exist alone on independent film without stars. You have to have enough money. If you are lucky enough to have money to get stars, you'll get noticed. Like my last film, From the Shadows, right? Bruce Davison and Keith David, 2 great horror stars, right? They Live, The Thing, Willard, the X-Men movies, right? Bruce Davison won his Academy Award nominee, one of my favorite actors. But I got a lot of press for that movie, and a lot of people loved it because it was the first time in years that Bruce Davison and Keith David had fully realized characters that were in the whole movie, not just a scene or two with their name on top. And everyone said, "How'd you do it for the amount of money you made the movie for?" And I said, "Creative scheduling." Bruce is in the whole movie, so is Keith, but I shot Keith out in 2 days and Bruce in 1.
Amazing.
And you have no idea that they are
Well, we should be clear because people might not know it. The feature film can take, like, I shot my feature film in 12 days, which was a miracle.
right.
Normally you should have 20, 30 minimum.
This was an 18-day shoot.
Yeah, exactly. 18 day, and you shot everything with these two actors in 1 day with one and 2 days with another.
The other, yeah.
So imagine that scheduling.
And the way we did it, Bruce was very scared. I mean, he was in his 70s. He's like, we're shooting like 15 pages of dialogue. I said, Bruce, just don't have to memorize the dialogue. Familiarize yourself with it. And we're going to have these cue cards. And you're going to read off the cue cards. Well,
Which saves the actor a lot of time to memorize.
yeah. And, we did 15 pages a day.
18 pages a day again for people who don't.
Well, insane, right? You get 3, 4, 5 pages a day. As long as you have to memorize his lines, he was fine. It's just like if he came in and did a commercial.
And you don't need to do the full coverage, which is another thing, right? Like we used to have, like, if you wanted to do a perfect scene, you would have, first of all, multiple takes of every camera, and then you have multiple camera shots, right? Like you would have like a close-up, medium, maybe 2 shot, and an establishing shot. Well, with 8K, if you are finishing on 4K,
You can
do it and cut it in post-production.
Yeah.
Right? Which saves you
and we had
a lot of time.
We had 2 cameras to cope. Now, even getting the part of the movie, the beginning when we first see Keith and Bruce, they're together in an old, like those old infomercials at night. You used to see at 2:00 in the morning, right? Selling something. So what they were supposed to be together on the set for 1 day, right? And it was the first time Bruce and Keith had ever worked together. It was like getting Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi together in a movie, right? 2 horror icons who'd never worked together. And they knew each other, but they never worked. They were so excited to work together. It was great. And they had a total geek fest. Oh, when I worked on this guy's film, I worked on his film. It was like to be a fly on the wall to see these 2 guys, these 2 veteran guys talk. It was great. But what we did was Bruce was supposed to be on the set, but he was shooting 1923 and Ozark, right? And there was a COVID scare on Ozark, and they had to cut the shoot short, and he had to go back to LA, where he had to shoot 1923, right? And now he wasn't able to come to New York to be with Keith, who was here preparing for a play on Broadway. So Bruce had to go back to Ozark to finish the shoot there once the 8-day COVID thing was over. So now Bruce is in LA, Keith is in New York. What do we do? Well, we shot Bruce in front of a green screen there. We got a guy that was Keith's height, put him next to him, and then dropped Keith in later with another background. And they look like they're talking to each other. And because it's supposed to be an old infomercial, it worked fine. The other scene, they're supposed to be in a classroom together, but one's in LA, one's in New York. So instead of like shooting at another time and holding up the production and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars while we wait, what we did was we rewrote the scene that Keith is in his classroom and Bruce calls in on a, was it a Zoom? What was the one before Zoom back a few years ago? Was, what they call that? Oh, I can't think of it. There was another service.
What's it?
What was it? Skype. Yes, Skype. So he calls him on a Skype, and we created a dedicated service line, and we had a live Zoom conversation. Bruce came in from his where he was in his office at his he had like a cult house where he was the leader of a cult, and he's in his office at the cult, and Keith is in his classroom, and they talked live to each other over the Zoom we set up the dedicated service line, so there were no messes up, and they acted live to each other, and it worked. And then when in the editing, we put the Skype thing around it, and it looked like Keith got it on his laptop, shot it up to the big screen in the front of the classroom, and big giant Bruce, who's the head of this cult, is looming over Keith David. It worked even better than if they were in the room together.
So you have so many creative ways of lowering the budget and achieving the resulting effect. But what I was also interested in is special effects in horrors. You know, I'm a filmmaker, but I never did any of this. Just to give you a little anecdote with Jim and you regarding the current film, which I don't know how much you can talk about it. Maybe you can tell us.
Sure.
But there was this super cool thing. So we were talking to Jim about some prosthetics which were made for the movie, and we talk over the phone, and he's like, "Oh, maybe I will have to send you the leg," and I'm like, "No, a head is enough." And I was thinking, and then I thought about Snowden, and I was like, "Wait." So NSA is listening to all our conversation, and they're right now. Some AI is analyzing what we talk about. Like some body parts are being sent by mail between two guys.
I got you a better one. When we shot episode 50, right? We were late and everyone was really hungry, so some of the guys didn't take off their makeup, and one of the guys had just gotten burned, and we had latex burns on him, and his face was bloody. We all pile in my car, and we're going along the Jersey Turnpike, and we're speeding a little bit, right? Because we're hungry. Next thing I know, woo, 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 the cops pull us over, and he comes up to the front of the car, and he looks at the car and goes, "What are you gentlemen doing? Did you know you were speeding?" And the guy leans forward. He goes, "Yes, officer, I know, because we're really hungry." And he's got burns and he's bleeding, and the cop goes for his gun. And we're like, "No, we're making a movie." He goes, "Are you hurt? Do you need medical assistance?" He goes, "No, it's fake. It's latex. We're making a movie." We pull off the burn scabs, and he's wiping off the blood. "See, I'm okay. I'm okay."
So that was a good quality.
Yes, we got lucky.
Wow, that is a really cool story. But how is it done? You know, like I don't even know how do you do the blood? Like what's blood? Ketchup?
No. There's actually a secret every special effects master I use a lot. I've always, because he's my guy, is Vincent Guastini. I mean, he's done everything from The Taking of Deborah Logan, Requiem for a Dream, Last of the Mohicans. I mean, he's one of the biggest there is. And all special effects guys have their own little concoction of how they make the blood, but I particularly like Vince's because it doesn't stain floors. So if we're not building a set, we're renting a house. If we get some on the wood floor, it actually comes off. So he's got his own concoction, but it's just a mixture of food coloring and chemicals and stuff, mostly all natural stuff.
So it's not standard. People like
No, there's not a standard. Some of it's sugar water, some of it, and with different consistencies. It's almost like making rock candy just without heating it up and boiling it first.
And what about the prosthetics? Like you send me the prosthetic for your
Right.
film.
Well,
It looks unbelievable. It's amazing.
the prosthetics are a much bigger thing, especially when you're dealing with a star like with Keith David and From the Shadows, when psychopathy is going to be a full body prosthetic because someone's basically top part of their body gets caved in at some point in the movie with a pipe wrench. But how that's done is it's a long, laborious process, but it starts with you take off almost all your clothes, right? Just to the briefs, and two small straws to put up your nose, and you lie back. And they put Vaseline and a hair cap, bowl cap on with Vaseline over your eyebrows and your eyelashes, and you close your eyes, and you're lying in like this, almost like a coffin, a body shaped coffin, and your legs are a little apart and your arms are a little apart, and they pour this gook over you, this latex thing that they pour in, and within a few minutes it hardens, and you breathing through the straws, and then they cut you out of it, They lift it up, and that's the mold. They pour the plastic into the mold, close it up, let it cure overnight with some at a certain temperature. And when they peel off out the outside, they have a perfect representation of your body inside. Now, there's a few variations to that. If you do it right, you take half the mold, fill it halfway, just enough along the form, and then you could lay in a skeleton, pig guts, you know, uh, uh, a prosthetic heart and lungs. Sometimes they use actual heart and lungs from pigs and make so it looks even more real. And you put that in, and you pour the rest over, let it cure, and then they shave off the excess and they paint it so it looks human, and there's your dead body. If you got to do a face, they'll actually take the mold of your face that you've made and apply, like how they do the Living Dead or anyone that's deformed, the Elephant Man or whatever. They put clay, sculpturing clay, and they sculpt the face, and that becomes the mold. They put the gook over that. When they peel it off, there's your face. They cut out the eyes, the nose, and they use latex to put it on, and then makeup to smooth it in so it becomes part of the texture of your skin. Sometimes they put a wig on to cover the line of where the mask ends and the face begins. But it's a long process, and when you're shooting a movie, you really get 12 hours. Like, you get 10 hours of shooting, and that includes hair and makeup. But for actors that do the have to be under the makeup, it takes like 4 hours to apply it. So you're by the time you're done, you're left with about 6 hours to shoot. So putting on makeup really puts a strain on your schedule to get stuff in. So one of the tricks that we do is for the faraway shots, we'll use a body double. Um, Most actors have, at least name actors, have stuntmen. So we'll make up the same body type, everything, and we'll make up the stuntman for the faraway shots, and they could work longer, cheaper. They're like pay one price, but the actor gets paid. He's got to be out in 10 hours, so all the close-ups and everything are usually the actor. So a lot of times you'll see someone in the makeup; it's not really the actor. Sometimes, and there are other tricks too, for special effects. For episode 50, one of the big things, and this is just good for low budget filmmakers to know. One of the big things at the time The Grudge was out and The Ring, and you had that creaky, ghost, right? Kind of thing. They would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to do those effects with CGI, right? And make it all disjointed, the walking and the whole thing with the hair and the eyes. So, I didn't have that kind of money on episode 50. It was only a $109,000 budget. So what I did was I hired a Cirque du Soleil performer who was double jointed and had her walk backwards, do a crab walk and walk with her hands like all twisted. We got her to fold herself up in a little box and come out of it backwards. And then we played it forward, dropped out a few frames, and made the film jump a little bit, and you couldn't tell that it wasn't a big CGI scene. So,
So you're a big proponent of like more practical.
all practical effects.
Yeah.
And I think the audience likes it better. I think the audience got to the point where they could see CGI a mile away. Like we used to be able to see green screen and, and you would see the puppet in the Ray Harryhausen, the great old like King Kong and Clash of the Titans and all that, the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. And you would see the shoot 14 frames, moving arm, shoot 14 frames, moving arm, and it would look herky jerky. So today you can see the CGI. So I think especially when you're dealing in horror, the more real it is. Like for a while they tried to do CGI blood. It looks terrible. It just doesn't look real. You got to get that real, you got to get the pump and pump it through. Yeah. Like I remember when we shot Dr. Chopper, the scene where he cuts off a guy's hand and we have the blood pump. And we forgot to tell the actor, Ed Grenadier, who played Dr. Chopper, may he rest in peace. He he chopped off the hand and he kept his mouth open. So when the pump shot the blood up for the cut off hand, it went right down his throat. He started choking. He's like, and we had to shoot it again. So you got to be careful when you use this stuff. But there's all kinds of tricks. It was really just a pump, like one of those pump guns. We pump it up like the water guns, it'd shoot out and a big splash.
Do you think there is an upcoming change with special effects being done digitally because of
Yeah.
AI?
Yes. In fact, I'm working on a film with Vince now called Beyond Human, which is going. The script, I mean, 20 years ago would have been, probably a 50, 60, $1 million movie like The Terminator to do. Now, I mean, he literally did the special effects on his phone using AI. I mean, he's done some werewolf movies, and he had a werewolf head, and we did a test. And he shot the animatronic werewolf head, and then used AI to create the body and the things running across the screen. And he just put a few commands to AI. He took for a test of a futuristic city blowing up. He took a still frame from the old 80s Buck Rogers of the 25th Century city and moved through it and blew it up with just a few commands. Unreal Engine is going to change everything. That's the gaming engine.
Yeah.
You can create worlds with it, spaceships, anything, and then you could shoot in front of a green screen, your people, the actual scenes that you need, and then drop them into this Unreal Engine. And, I could be sitting in the middle of New York City in an apartment and put someone on a desert planet, an ice planet, in the middle of the Rockies. There's a program called Geometry where I could shoot any landscape, plug it into Geometry, and Geometry will create a digital landscape based on that picture. And you cannot tell that it's CGI. It looks real because it bases it on the picture.
Yeah, this is, we also discussed it in some of the previous episodes, how AI will, in my opinion, there is a lot of risk, but in my opinion, actually democratizes filmmaking because it will lower the cost of special effects. So now your imagination is the limit, nothing else.
But for every reaction, there's an equal and an opposite reaction. So when you watch Marvel, right, you see all those names, right, of the people that do this special effects shop, these digital effects, worked on this, worked on that. All those people are going to be out of work.
Yeah.
And there's going to be 2 names, 3 names there. That's it.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part of it.
Unless the AI agents get names. So there will be like.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, whenever you're doing something that takes away people's jobs, and this is the thing that scares me about the future of everything is, are we going to turn into those blobs in WALL-E, because we don't work anymore and have nothing to do? I mean, if AI, in China, they're even working with AI newsmen and newswomen.
I use that technology. It's coming. And I think what will happen, for example, with actors, right? Like when you use Unreal Engine or Unity, you are recording the actors usually or almost always, and then you are creating the environment digitally, right?
Right.
Geometry and other techniques. But the time comes now that the actors will be digitalized. So
Yeah.
Brad Pitt or whoever is now famous. Yeah, he's not famous anymore, right? It will create his digital clone, and his digital clone will be playing in the movies, and you will not be able to say.
He'll be young forever.
Yeah.
And probably they won't even use Brad Pitt. They'll probably go back to Clark Gable and Humphrey Bogart and James Cagney.
Yeah, because Brad Pitt will be smart enough not to sign off his digital image, and these guys cannot.
Yeah.
And we have no say.
Paul Newman will do movies with Robert Redford 100 years from now.
Yeah, and it's both good and bad, but maybe everybody will be able to do Paul Newman movie, or
Well,
maybe it will be the
I wonder, if actors are going to wind up like, vinyl records, or is the digital technology, as good as it is, will never be perfect.
I think unfortunately it will be perfect, but there is one thing which will stay relevant, which is theater. So personal experiences of performances will never be gone.
But movies will lose something. I mean, the scene where Brando picks up Eva Marie Saint's glove and puts it on, and as just on a split second decision in the middle of filming, that's going to be gone. When Mickey Rourke does a striptease for Marissa Tomei in The Wrestler, that was a minute he had on the set. Just decided to do it in that take. And that'll be lost. There'll be no spontaneity.
Yeah, so I was worried like you are for 2 years, and as I was telling many times, I was telling people, I got so scared that this AI will take over all the jobs that I learned how to do tiling and
Right.
framing, and I build all this basement here. But I talked to Mike Trainer, an AI professor, and he said that it's all true that the technology itself will succeed, like it will be perfect. But the point is, why would people do that? What's the point, right? So what he means is, we go to see movies because we know that there is a real human actor behind it, and that's the value in itself. When the movies will be with just digital actors, it's like watching an animation. People will watch an animation, but will they want to watch movies where there is no real humans they can follow as a star,
I don't know, because, I mean, are we going to be still making movies?
I think
Or are we going to put on Oculus glasses and become the lead character in the movie and live the movie through the eyes of the character, feel everything that the character does? You get to decide which character you're going to kill first. You're going to decide if you're going to be the hero or the villain. You're going to have to decipher the clues and be Indiana Jones and find the Temple of Doom. I mean, I think that's where it's going. I think eventually you're going to be the lead character in all your own movies, just like the first person shooters, video games. You see the character in front of you. I think eventually that's what it's going to be.
you know that I am the professor of virtual reality, actually. I always say of field, but I was hired because I pioneered the interactive movies in VR. And Jim played in one of my first ever volumetric films. So, and I disagree with you. I think it will happen for sure. There's no doubt there will be this form of entertainment. It's described in a novel called Diamond Age by Neil Stevenson. Maybe you know this, right? Called Interactive. So I love this stuff. I do this personally. That will never remove a movie as a form of entertainment.
I hope not.
In the same sense as theater state exists despite movies existing, paintings are made despite photography, it will exist. The question is, what will be the cultural relevance, the industry size? Maybe it will be lower, but I'm not sure, because there is a beauty in suspension of disbelief.
Yes, but I'm a pessimist because I feel if the streamers and the studios control everything eventually and monopolize the entire market, their job is to make things as cheap as possible. If you could create it through AI without paying an actor and without paying royalties, they make more money. And if they only make movies where you're the lead, you put it on, you watch it, or you're only going to look at dead actors because they're cheaper to hire and digitized, not living dead zombies, but digitized dead actors, then that's what you're going to get, because there are going to be no other spaces. You'll see some old movies in, a revival house somewhere, but eventually, they'll monopolize just like they're doing now with cutting out independent film.
Okay, but look at the music industry. So music industry was well, not destroyed. It went through a revolution, and difficult one, because of streaming of music, right?
Right.
Does it remove the incentives for you to go to a live concert?
No, that's the only thing that it keeps is a live concert, because you can no longer. I mean, when Madonna put out an album, I don't think people understand. She sold 80 million copies. Today, someone puts an album, sells 2 million copies, and they're like, this is a great, huge success. I mean, when you sell like 140 million copies, like Michael Jackson did with Thriller, those days are gone. You know, you put out your music for one reason now, to sell tickets to a concert.
Yeah. So that's because I want to go to the concert, not because I can get way better musical experience listening to on high-end headphones from streaming than in a concert when I sit in a corner
And someone looks like up to a millimeter, and they're gonna blow
yeah,
up.
I will go to the concert, and people will go to the concert. So for the same reason, the human reason, the reason there is a human in it, I think people will want to see real actors on screen, even if it costs them more.
Or is that a motion memory recall? Is it something that this generation still does because the last generation did it and the next generation won't? Are we doing that because it's habit, or because we need to have that interaction? I mean, there might come a day where the next generation goes, I don't have to go to a concert. Will that be the end of music? How they make money?
Maybe, but I again, I used to think that 2 years ago when I was going through the depression of no, I'm using the word depression. I didn't have depression, but I was going through these worries about the AI. I was thinking, well, you can create a system which creates better music than you ever heard ever. It will be like, the AI will create a music which responds to your brain patterns as a feedback loop and creates better version. And at the end of the day, it's the best music. Will that remove the need for music? And then now I think like Mike, no, it will be still fine. I will.
Well, you're more positive. I consider myself more an idealistic existential nihilist. So,
I'm an existentialist too, but not nihilist. So therefore,
so I always think everything's gonna go. Everyone thinks it's gonna be bad. It's just gonna get worse.
and I think everything will be fine.
Famous last word.
As long as we survive the revolution, will be ongoing, we survive the AI revolution, we'll be just aristocracy. We'll be, Dracula's.
Yes. You're the guy that on the Titanic going, don't worry, it's just a little water, it'll be fine. just stay in your cabins, it'll be fine.
Well, I see. I'm really worried about it. No, but I feel for you. I worry about it. I used to worry very much. Now I'm trying to. Maybe I'm trying to delude myself into worrying less.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it'll become like, this niche market where we see weird films, like Midnight Madness used to be. That would be cool. If there was this, like, became cool to go see a weird movie, and we were all original, ridiculous films, and anything could happen. Like we went back to making David Lynch type movies, and just, things that were different.
Okay, look at this. We look at this podcast, right? If I wanted to do a program in TV 30 years ago, zero chance. First of all, I have an accent, right? No one will listen to me. Second, what is my chance to record it? I would need to have such an expensive cameras. I just can't do it. Now anybody can do a podcast.
Well, you're talking to a guy who helped create the reality TV industry.
Yeah.
I worked with Dr. Dre and Ed Lover and Ted Demme and Peter Doherty when they created Yo MTV Raps, which was one of the first reality shows. And back then, there was no unscripted contracts. There was no unscripted division at the agencies. No one even knew how to pay us. There was no royalties. There was none of that. We just got on TV. We made it up as we went along, and look where it went, and the more people get used to something, right, the more the other things fade away. So as reality TV has become more and more popular, CBS, NBC, all the scripted shows kind of faded away, and who knows where it's going to go.
Yeah. But what I mean is that since I can do a podcast, and first generation immigrant who came here 10 years ago, and I can publish it to any number of people who is interested in watching it, in the same sense, this democratization of filmmaking might actually result in many creative results which would never be possible before. As like in the independent filmmaking, because of digital cameras, made a lot of cool films, not many bad films, and a lot of also cool films, which wouldn't be possible in the traditional Hollywood era.
Well, don't kids today say movies are too long? They can't take. They don't want to go to the theaters because it's too long. They watch 2 or 3 minutes on TikTok.
But yes, you're right. But look at what happens also as kind of the reaction to it. So there is the shorts, the super popular TikTok 1 minute thingy, which I'm also addicted to now. But yeah, it's very easy to get addicted to it. But the second side is 3-hour podcasts. You never had 3-hour podcasts before. Did they even exist? Like the hour on TV interview would be like long. 3 hours, unheard of. 8 hours, some people do 8 hours podcasts and people listen to it. So there is a reaction to this shortness of attention and switching to like full attention and going in that.
And I think there's something, that, you're driving every day. So you listen to it, over a couple of days, driving to work, driving back while you're on the train, commuting, you put in those earbuds, and you tune out the world. You can just listen.
Or if you work, like when I was doing the basement, I listened to so many audiobooks and podcasts because I had the whole day. I'm physically working and I need attention to that. Well, maybe that's why the walls are not exactly straight, but I listen to it.
There's only, I think, even that there's a moment where you reach critical mass because there's only so many free hours in a day. And we've seen, the podcast world especially be hit really hard after the pandemic because when people go back to work, they don't have time to listen to the podcast. And it's, it's the podcasts are condensing. And again, you're left with only the biggest names. And
always.
yeah, but there was a time when, upstart artists could break through, like Trent Reznor and these guys even back in the 90s, right? They broke through. Films broke through, like Rocky, independent little films broke through, look at Brokeback Mountain, right? Who would have guessed a movie about two gay cowboys was going to make over $100 million? I mean, you would never have guessed that, movies like Parasite, right? Why Parasite? I don't know. It's a great movie. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, right? Well, there's always been a place for movies to break through. Because again, like I said in the beginning, it's the audience that decides. So what you decide to watch is going to influence what happens to entertainment. And if the audience, you out there, decide you want to see movies, you'll get to see movies. If you accept the junk and just go like sheep into that good night, and that's all you're going to get is junk.
That is an awesome ending.
Yeah.
I really like that. Thank you very much. The
Thank you.
conversation was super interesting.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Thank you.